Great. Next up, we have Sue AnderBois, who's running for Lieutenant Governor.
Thanks. Hi friends, it's lovely to be with you tonight. So I am Sue AnderBois. I am a current member of the Providence City Council representing Ward 3, the northern part of the east side, and I am running to be your next Lieutenant Governor. I'm excited to chat with you for a little bit. I brought up a notebook because I'm a big note taker, so as you ask questions or give input, I'm going to make sure I'm taking a ton of notes. But I wanted to start by just asking how many of you have any idea what the Lieutenant Governor does? Like, what's the job description? Okay, a couple. That's amazing. This is like the first time anyone's raised their hand when I've asked that. Not the current one, I just mean the office. So I wanted to share a little bit about, one, why I'm running, but also what the Lieutenant Governor's office does, but also what it really could do. And I'm asked a lot, like when I tell folks that I'm running for this office, like, why? Like, what does that office do? And so I wanted to share a little bit about that. I'm going to take a quick step back to share a little bit of something about me and my thoughts on Rhode Island, which will lead right into that. So the thing I really want to share is one of the things I love most about this state is our people. I don't know how many of you have lived here your whole lives or if you've lived in other places. I have lived in other places. And being in Rhode Island, the thing I'm struck by is like how many just experts and brilliant people we have across the state on a variety of topics. Like maybe you saw the news today about how many James Beard nominated chefs we have in our state, which is, we're punching way above our weight. Some of the folks who wrote the UN climate report live in my neighborhood of Providence. We have education experts, we have people expert. I'm not gonna name all the type of experts because we would be here for like a million hours because we have 1 million residents, but that's the thing I'm struck by. And then the thing that really, I'm just gonna say like grinds my gears, is why aren't we then at the top of like every single list in this state, like in this country? You know, we look around and we're not at the top of a lot of lists, and it doesn't make sense to me because we have so much greatness in this state and we are not leveraging it. And so then when I think about, what is the role of Lieutenant Governor and what is the promise of that office? I really see the promise of that office as like leveraging that greatness and taking on some of the really hard kind of interdisciplinary, intersectional issues of the state and coming up with some real solutions for Rhode Islanders. So I think of that office as having 3 roles. And I'm going to talk through them and talk a little bit about my background. I'm also happy at the end to talk about anything that's in my resume. I'm not just going to read through it, but happy to answer any questions on any of that. But the Lieutenant Governor's office, in my view, really has 3 roles. There's the one that's the only legally obligated role, and so I'm just going to touch on it at the beginning. The Lieutenant Governor is there, and Cumberland is familiar with this because your former mayor has done this. The Lieutenant Governor is there in case something happens and the governor needs to leave for whatever purpose. The Lieutenant Governor is there to step in. So in my mind, you want someone who is prepared and ready, has the stamina and vision to serve, but is not distracted by that. They are applying for the job they want, which is Lieutenant Governor, but if called on to serve, they could be ready for that other job. So I just want to touch on that because that is the only legally mandated role in the office. But I really think you should, and this is my thought on the office, someone who wants the job they're applying for, but could be ready if necessary. So that's the first. The second, and a lot of people don't realize, the Lieutenant Governor's office oversees 3 task forces, or they're the chair or co-chair of 3 task forces. There's one on small business, there's one on long-term care, and there's one on emergency management. Each one of those are super vital topics. I'll touch on emergency management for 1 second. We're seeing the dismantling of FEMA at the federal level. We're seeing FEMA tell states, it's on you. In my role in my day job, I used to work at a place called the Nature Conservancy. They're the largest environmental nonprofit in the world. And I did climate resilience planning in every single city in town. That's actually how I met Sarah when we did the municipal resilience program here in Cumberland, which was one of my very favorite ones because you guys are so engaged. But have seen
talk a lot, that's all.
Yeah. I think you were in my small group, it was really fun. But so I've facilitated those types of resilience efforts in partnership with the state's infrastructure bank in all 39 cities and towns, and have seen kind of on the ground like what our resilience challenges are and what our opportunities are. We're also seeing new types of emergencies. Many of you probably know in my neighborhood of Providence at the end of last year we had a shooting, we had a tragic shooting at Brown, and the emergency management system did not work. Nobody got alerts on their phones that there was a shooter walking around my neighborhood. And so I was getting calls from my residents saying, why didn't I know? I was out at a holiday party walking around the neighborhood and this man was just walking around. That is a failure. That is a failure of our government, city and state, that folks did not know about that. That's the type of thing that an emergency management task force should be saying, oh God, how do we fix this so this never happens again? And so there are these 3 task forces, each on incredibly important topics. And I think you less want someone, or I feel like that office less needs someone who's an expert in every single one of those, though I do have experience in all 3 of those topics, but someone who knows how to manage a team and a task force. So like I said at the beginning, we have some of the most brilliant people in this state. And I feel like those kind of task force meetings or those kind of coalitions could go one of 2 ways. And we've both been in both types of meetings. On one side, you could have these really expensive meetings where you bring people in, they're kind of like, oh my God, why am I at this meeting? It lasts for an hour, maybe 90 minutes. Everybody's so frustrated by the end, nothing happened. They leave, they go back to their desk, they have a coffee, they kvetch with some friends. What was the purpose? The second, and this is how I like to run meetings and how I run a task force, and I'll give some examples of my experience in a second, but you're like, wow, this was created for a purpose. The General Assembly or whoever created this body, you create it yourself, whatever. What is the overall purpose? What is the purpose of this individual meeting? And how do we leverage the greatness we have in the room and could be bringing into the room to really solve some real problems for Rhode Islanders? And I'll give a quick example from my time on council. So I currently serve on the Providence City Council. I came in with a certain number of priorities, which I've really made a lot of achievements on. But one thing that was not initially on my radar was a street called North Main Street. And if you've spent any time in Providence, you've probably been on North Main. But if you haven't, it's a major corridor or thoroughfare that goes right through the heart of my ward. If you are familiar with where the big Whole Foods is, it's basically from there north to the Pawtucket border, about 2 miles. And it's incredibly complicated. It's a RIDOT-owned street, mostly, but parts are owned by the city. Some of the lights are owned by RIDOT, some are owned by the city, some are owned by the Public Property Department, but some are owned by a different city department. Some are owned by DPW. It gets really complicated, like who can control what happens on North Main. And in my first 2 years on council, 4 people were killed on North Main Street. People just, one of them was an older woman, just going on her daily walk with her husband, Vonda. Another was a young man who was crossing over from Charles Gate to go to to get to the bus stop. After he had just cleaned out his mother's apartment after she passed, he was hit by a car. And so we had 4 people die, and I was like, okay guys, like, we're not doing it, it should have ended after the first one, but I was like, okay, why is nothing happening? Every 5 years, roughly, there's a new plan for North Main Street. And they've all said roughly the same thing. There was a really amazing one done by my predecessor, Nearville of Fortune, who was the council person before me. All the plans say roughly the same thing about what we need to do on North Main, and literally none of them ever got implemented. So it's like, what is going on? There's all this finger pointing. People are mad at RIDOT because they're not making these changes. People are mad at the mayor because he's not making these changes. People are mad at whoever they want to be mad at because, and it turns out none of them could make the changes. And so what we did, or what I did, was I said, okay guys, we're all getting in a room. And I created the North Main Street Task Force, very creatively named. And I didn't create a new plan. I said, Nearva's plan is great. Nearva's name is on this plan. I love this plan. We're just gonna do parts of this plan. This is our vision. And we brought together RIDOT. We got RIDOT to come. We brought together like 6 of the different city agencies, RIPTA, and then some neighborhood groups. There's a few business owners. There's one business owner who owns about 1/3 of the businesses in that whole corridor. So Tom came. You know, we had a number of the other small business owners, residents. Turns out one of our nearby residents is also a really amazing traffic engineer. So I was like, obviously this is the resident we want on this commission. And bringing folks together, ironically, the council's the only government body that has no say over what happens in North Main. But who cares? Nobody was doing it. So I live my life by saying it's what are you gonna do about it? It's tattooed on my arm. And so I was like, we gotta do something about this. We created this task force and we got to work right away. We didn't create a new plan. We didn't sit around for a while. It was, every meeting had a purpose. And since in the last year or so since we've been meeting, I've invested $500,000 in new lighting across the whole corridor because lighting was an issue in a number of the crashes. We got RIDOT to change a lot of the lighting at a lot of the like pedestrian signals that's what we're looking for at the intersections. RIDOT paid for and implemented a whole road safety assessment for the whole road and removed certain signs that were outdated, put in some new signs. The police issued so many traffic violations, we needed an extra day at municipal court. Judge Lombardi, Judge Lombardi and I are tight, but he was like, oh my God, Sue, this is crazy. Why are we, there's so much, but nobody knew what the speed limits were because it's never enforced. And so we got folks to get together and work. And at the same time that we're doing all those little things, we were planning for the big things. We actually just got RIDOT to transfer all the state transportation improvement program funds to the city so we could control the next steps and what happens longer term planning. We just opened the bids for that. So that's the longer example that I meant to give of like how you really run a task force. Like if that agency is in charge of 3 task forces, you use those to get some things done because that's what Rhode Islanders deserve. And then so the first task of the Lieutenant Governor, stand in if necessary. The second are these task forces. And then the third is really, you guys, you get to decide. And that, I think, is the beauty of the Lieutenant Governor's office, is you can say, wow, we can pivot. There are some really, really difficult challenges we face, both because of the federal government that is coming at us, but also we already had a lot of difficult challenges from our challenging energy prices. I mean, Kim talked about a number of them, but things that not one agency can really fix. So you need someone who can really galvanize folks and say, how do we look at this from a more systems perspective? How do we bring the right people into a room and either work through the administration, if you can work with the governor, which would be the goal, work with the General Assembly, work with community, and really make some change for the community. So you really want someone who can kind of step into a void and say, hey, this is what needs to get done, and we're gonna do it, and this is how. And I'm no stranger to that kind of state level leadership. I was Rhode Island and also the country's first ever statewide food director of food strategy in the Raimondo administration. She called me the food czar, which is a very silly job title. And on day one, I remember people being, what does a food czar do? I'm like, I'm about to show you. And so we put together the state's first food plan. It was called Relish Roti. I did not come up with that name, so I can say it was the cutest name of all time. And then we put that together and we had tons of input from Rhode Islanders across the state. So I talked with farmers and fishers and food businesses and people working on anti-hunger initiatives and food waste initiatives. And we really built that thing from the ground up. And then after we released it on May 17th, 2017, got to work implementing it. And I remember it was another one of those times where I was like, we put out this plan and people were like, what are you gonna do next? Another plan? I'm like, no, we're gonna do this plan. We're gonna get the things here done. And so I had that job right until the end of 2019, which was a fantastic position. But you need that kind of energy, that kind of enthusiasm in that office to say, we've got to get some shit done. I spent a lot of time at City Hall. We got to get some stuff done and really step into that void and say, what needs to get done? How am I going to do it? Who am I bringing to the team? And really getting that done. So that's the kind of energy and enthusiasm that I would be bringing to the office of the Lieutenant Governor, and I would be really excited to work with y'all to do so, and I hope I can earn your support. But I'm also happy to answer any questions about myself or the office or anything else that might be on your mind, because I just really love Cumberland. Your favorite restaurant here, whatever you think you want me to know. But thank you.
Any questions? Sarah?
Yay.
So I guess I have 2 questions. One, obviously you mentioned we met because you were helping Cumberland on our resiliency plan.
Yeah.
How do you envision, if you were to be the Lieutenant Governor, working with and engaging with municipalities? Because a lot of the, maybe I'm biased because I work for a municipality, but I think a lot of the stuff that most impacts people's day-to-day life happens at the municipal level.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, my first question is, how do you see yourself engaging with municipalities and local governments long-term? And then my second question is, you mentioned that one of the task force is about long-term care. As a person navigating, trying to be one of my grandfather's caretakers who has Alzheimer's and dementia, trying to move him into long-term care facility, that is a system that is deeply complicated and troublesome for a lot of people to navigate. So what kind of changes do you see as being beneficial in Rhode Island in that regard?
Yeah, 2 awesome questions. So the first, I want to agree with you about the role of municipal government. I feel like municipal government, I mean, I'm a city councilor, but that's where the rubber really hits the road. And I'll say I host a lot of community meetings, and when I came into office, it's like, I'm gonna do all this big climate policy, I'm gonna do all this big transportation policy, which 100% have done. And also, the meetings where I've gotten the most traction are I tried to change a street to being a one-way, and it was 45 people showed up, and I was like, we're not doing it, I promise, changed my mind completely. Because it's this skinny, it really shouldn't have to, but that was fine, it's not my decision, people have spoken. But that's like the things that really impact people's lives. And also, and I probably said this at your MRP workshop because I believe this so deeply, but municipal government is so under-resourced and so understaffed, and so many of us are facing similar challenges. Like, I represent Providence, and we probably have the most resources, we're the biggest city, and still there isn't enough to work on. And so I want to make sure, especially across all of those topics, but anything I work on, that there's a real partnership with municipalities and a way to share resources, share ideas, and leverage each other. Like an example I'll give from my time on council, but it's related to resilience, so it could be part of this emergency management, is I'm working on an ordinance around stormwater management and stormwater management fees. And controversial new fees, nobody loves them. And also our infrastructure is so old. Like we still have pipes in Providence that are made out of wood, and they are handling some of our stormwater. You guys might too, I'm not sure, but and so we're seeing historic flooding. All the towns are actually really seeing historic flooding during even minor storms. There's a lot of needs we have for infrastructure and no way to fund them. And so I've been working in partnership with the mayor's office on what that could look like and how do we do that together. There was this big push, we gotta do it first. We're gonna get out there first. Turns out Newport's also working on it. So instead of being we gotta go first, I just called the sustainability director of Newport, who's my friend Teresa, and was like, can we do this holding hands? What does that look like? Because you're busy, we're busy. How do we learn from each other and do this the right way? So it's not who gets to go first, but Rhode Island should just figure out how to do this together. And so I want to have that kind of ethos in the Lieutenant Governor's office of all 39 cities and towns are working as hard as they can. People do not have enough staff, they don't have enough resources, especially with FEMA being dismantled and other federal agencies, the resources are not there. And so we should not be in competition with each other. We should be sharing resources, sharing information, and all of that. So I would definitely be working with all 39 cities and towns and think that there's a lot of ways we can leverage and learn from each other, because we're all facing very similar issues, just with our own flavors. Every town is different, but every town is experiencing flooding, every town is experiencing high energy prices. We're all facing the healthcare and housing crisis. It's just a little different in all of our towns, and you just have to understand how to work with that. Long-term care, that is a huge issue, and I was actually just meeting with some folks from the SEIU, especially with folks who are in their homes dealing with dementia or other aging issues, those workers too. And you're doing for a family member, so that's even different, but there are just not the resources, and there's some really good ideas out there that I'd like us to leverage of how we better resource those, the in-home workers. We should
Who are angels.
Who are angels sent from God, 100%. We actually just put a new in-home care training facility on North Main Street in Providence. I was really excited about it because there's just not enough of those workers. They're not resourced well enough. They're doing really hard physical labor. They're getting injured on the job. They need protections. So I want to make sure that task force was really understanding the really day-to-day challenges that people are facing, both from a policy perspective, but also that's hard work that wears people out emotionally and physically. And so I want to make sure we have those protections in place long-term. I've been spending a lot of time with members of the Long-Term Coordinating Care Council to better understand because there's so many different organizations. This is another great thing about Rhode Island that can be challenging. There's so many different commissions that exist to try and get similar issues. Let's try and bring this together. Let's try and really make sure we're leveraging each other and not duplicating work, because nobody's got time for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Steph.
So with January's electric rates increasing 20% due to the renewable energy standard, and with anticipated by October, we will probably have the highest electric rates seen in the history of Rhode Island. What would you say to constituents and Rhode Island residents that are struggling with their bills right now and would like to see some relief from possibly pushing out the renewable energy standard?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm actually going to push back against the narrative that increase is being caused by the renewable energy standard. When you look, so one, thank you for bringing that up, and two, when we look at what is causing our increase in rates, and we actually have a rate case at the PUC right now for the first time in 5 or 6 years since PPL, which calls itself Rhode Island Energy, since they bought the business from National Grid. when we look at what's causing the increase in rates, there's a lot of things causing the increase, but the biggest and fastest and steepest rise has been in the distribution and transmission charges, which is like the poles, the wires, and the infrastructure underground, the pipes is the word I'm looking for. I don't know why it was escaping me. And the utility actually is incentivized to build as much infrastructure as they can. Their business model, which maybe you know, I don't know if you work in the utility, but
No, I work in the environment though.
the utility business model is built around, they get a rate of return on infrastructure investments. In different places around the country, there's different ways that utilities make their revenue, and there's different structures. We have a regulated monopoly, by and large. There's also Burgerville, which has its own, and Block, but by and large, most of us are under a regulated monopoly through Rhode Island Energy. And some states do a performance-based incentive. In Rhode Island, we do a rate of return based on infrastructure investments. So if your rate of return for your shareholders is based on infrastructure investments, a lot of things are going to need infrastructure investments. And so I think the real place we need to be looking right now to reduce rates for Rhode Islanders and stabilize is two things. One is, and that's why I'm also really excited that I just heard Kim talking about re-embedding the AG at the PUC. We need to take a really hard look at that rate case that's open right now, because they're already planning like steep increases to the distribution and transmission rates. I've chatted with the folks at the utility. I've worked in energy policy for most of my career, and they're like pretty clear about the fact that like because of the like how much it costs to be building infrastructure, the rates are going to be like up in October. They'll be the highest we've ever seen. So one, we need to be aggressively following that case and like understanding what their assumptions are, what the build out is, how like where they're building out, where is it necessary to build out, where could there be some non-wires, non-pipes alternatives, things like energy efficiency, demand side management, other forms of ways that we can meet that demand. I'd say the second thing is, and I tell my constituents all this all the time, like sign up for the energy efficiency programs. Like they are actually, there's some proposals for them to be cut right now. I serve on the state's Energy Efficiency Council, and we voted to oppose those cuts recently. The way that our energy efficiency programs are written in the state, they're required legislatively to be less than the cost of supply. So like they're guaranteed to be cost effective. So cutting them is actually like, it looks like you're saving money, but long-term you're actually not. It's kind of the example I give is like, or I think of is, I've spent a lot of my career in nonprofits, and if you look at a budget and you see, this floor is very like, I was like, did I just break the floor? I worked at nonprofits for a lot of my career, and if you look on the budget or like the personnel line, you'll see like a fundraiser, and you're like, oh, we could probably cut that person, that's a pretty big salary. But if you cut that person, you lose all the leverage of like what they bring in, and that's like trying to cut energy efficiency. It looks like a line you can cut, and that it'll save you money, but long-term you lose all of the benefits that it would have brought in. And energy efficiency is generally like a 1 to 2, 1 to 3 investment. So if we cut it from the bill, we're actually gonna pay for it on the back end. So it looks better on rates, but like overall bills tend to go up. I could talk about energy efficiency all day, so I will stop, but sign up for energy efficiency. And I think those are like the two big ones. Like that rate case is gonna be huge, and that making sure folks are really right now taking advantage of the energy efficiency programs is really important. Do the renewable energy programs have a cost? Yes. Does the status quo of overly relying on fossil gas have a cost? Also yes. And so if you compare those costs, especially if you have any investments, you know that if you invest only in one technology or one like stock or whatever, if you're not diversified is what I'm trying to say, you're really subject to the whims of that, and it's not a way to keep things stable. And right now our electric grid and our heating and cooling are primarily sourced from natural gas. And so we're subject to all the fluctuations that like we can't control. Like it's like the war on Ukraine is causing those fluctuations and other things. And so if we double down on only needing that, long-term we're gonna be subject to these like wild fluctuations. So everything has a cost, but I think helping us to diversify where we're getting energy from will actually stabilize things in the long run. It's really difficult right now with Trump going after like all of our most cost-effective ways to build out clean energy, like solar, wind, offshore wind. There was like 1,000 guys whose work, guys and gals, whose work has been on the line because of the attacks on offshore wind, which will be a lower cost resource once they can come online. But yeah, so that's a really good question. I think it's complicated, but there's a lot a lot of factors at play.
Just because you mentioned the energy efficiency,
Yeah.
do you agree with PUC's decision to take $11 million just to give to ratepayers, just to borrow, and then ratepayers have to essentially pay it back at the end of the year anyways?
Oh, I think they're just smoothing it out, is my understanding. I'd have to look at that decision. So I'm gonna say I'm not 100% sure exactly what they decided, and I don't wanna falsely speak, but I think part of what they were trying to do was like, instead of paying now during the winter when everybody's bills are tight, it'll happen later in the year. So it's just like are you doing it now or later kind of thing. So I don't think I would be opposed to it, but I'd have to look at it more carefully. It's a good question though. Do you work at the PUC?
No.
Oh. I love how mostly you're following the PUC issues. It's like amazing.
I work in environment policy, but.
Oh, nice. Oh, wait, we'll ask you later. Like, I feel like we should just vibe, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm going to ask back to the mayor question.
Oh, please.
Another political question. So if you were elected lieutenant governor, do you feel any sort of, I'm not saying pressure, but to, not have a difference of opinion than the governor?
No, I think that's actually the beauty of the lieutenant governor's office is because you are elected separately. You know, you can run on a ticket, but you are elected separately. I don't think you have to be their like right-hand person. And I think it's actually healthier if you're not. And you can say like, hey, wait a minute, what about this? Or like blah, blah. So even folks, and like, you guys are just getting to know me, but even folks for whom I'm like on their team who like, I think it's healthy to have disagreement and to be able to say that when it's relevant. And so I like your question because I feel like you see sometimes like, oh, I just have to stand by my man or I have to stand by my woman in office. And I think that does democracy a disservice to just be kind of like a yes person. And I don't think that's even like being a good team member. Like I think you need like radical candor sometimes to say like, hey, I actually don't agree with what you just did. And two adult people can have a different opinion about what the best course of action is. So.
No, I appreciate because I guess you're a opponent, right? Because the current office holder, and I kind of alluded to that, even more like talk radio type, but made a decision or came out in support of an individual and then was completely ostracized or whatever because she effectively owed her job to the governor. And so in my world, that was up to the governor to say, you know what, you are entitled to your opinion, even if it's different than mine.
Yeah.
But to allow that to happen and just to be completely, eviscerated on, which, I don't know how many people are listening to talk radio, but in any event, I do. That's
Yeah.
But in a perfect world, we would all be on the same page.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked that, whether it was appropriate or not. It's like, it depends, I guess, on what your perspective is, but if you come out and you say that it's not, that the Attorney General didn't find anything wrong doing, but effectively insinuates that something wasn't quite right there, there's an implication to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're seen as a potential opponent.
Yeah.
And all that really does is just keep continuing this distrust that I believe is being pounced upon, if you will, on the federal side, on the federal level, right? Where there is a time when we're entitled to our opinions, but the other people do have to stand. I thought it was totally inappropriate what she did have to go through. So that's the question. The question is, do you feel any sort of pressure to comply?
No, I don't think, and I don't think we should, and I think it helps for public trust if like we can be adults, like if we're gonna have disagreements, and I think about this a lot for municipal government, honestly, because like I think, and Sarah said this, it's kind of where the rubber hits the road, and so I see all the time how it's like our actions with our constituents at the local level, and I know people really respect you in Cumberland, so you do a great job of this, but really impacts how people feel about government overall. And so being able to stand up and say, like I was talking with someone the other day and they asked about this, and I think just being a real person with your constituents, with Rhode Islanders, goes a long way. Like the other day, like someone got a ticket in my neighborhood. They were parking, this is an example I think is relevant. They were parking overnight, they didn't know they needed a parking permit, and they called me and they got a ticket, they were really upset about it. And I was like, I'm sorry that that happened. That really stinks. It's really hard to weather a $50 ticket, but here's the link to sign up for the thing and blah, blah. And she kind of just paused and she was like, nobody in government's ever apologized to me before. And so I think us just being like real people with each other, like we need to rebuild that trust. People don't trust government. They don't trust the Democratic Party, like just to be real. And like that's on us to rebuild. And I think us just like pretending like we agree with each other all the time doesn't help. Like we need to be, I'll just give one other small example, but am I talking too much? Sorry.
No, that's me clapping.
Oh, thanks. I thought you were like, wrap it up. No, thank you. My former colleague, Helen Anthony, who served in the ward next to mine, Ward 2, we used to host a lot of, or a number, for big topics where we wanted to make sure people had a lot of opportunity to engage. We would sometimes host joint board meetings. We would do one on Zoom and then one together. I do my own as well, but sometimes we do it together. And when we did the one on the comprehensive plan, like Helen and I get along. She's like one of my dearest friends in the whole world. We agree on most things. And also there's some things we don't agree on. So people are like, what do you think about parking minimums? And I was like, we gotta eliminate parking minimums because they're driving up the cost of housing. And Helen's like, oh, that's a sure bad, that elimination of, and we can have healthy dialogue and disagreement on something that like is actually fairly controversial in our neighborhoods and show like, you can be adults who have different policy perspectives, who respect each other and have just come to a different set of opinions. And shake hands at the end of the day, you're gonna see which one, the voters want more, and that's fine, like, it's totally fine. So, yeah, and also, like, it's hard to, I'm trying to think how diplomats say this. I can't really be put in a corner, so I feel like I just wouldn't, that would be a difficult thing to try and do. I don't think people elect us to not stand up for them and not stand up for the things they elected us to do, so I would definitely be out there if I needed to be.
Thank you.
That was a great question.
Anyone else?
Yeah.